Alrighty. Let's roll. Hi there. I'm Chris from Airwindows. I'm waiting on the stream waking up. And we're going to code some plugins and such today. It's an interesting morning for me. I've just put out Iron Oxide Classic 2 and immediately got a pile of heckling in various directions. All from this one forum, but that's fine because I've actually started to post to a whole... I'm now posting to 4 forums. And one of them is based in the UK, so it's just a convenient time for... This is like evening for folks in the UK. Or late afternoon, more like. So I post to Gearsuds, KVR, Terry Manning's forum. Hey, Felipe. And now Dogs on Acid. Because I dropped by there and discovered that people... I had known from my website that people were in fact using Airwindows plugins in London a lot. There's a lot of people there. And it didn't occur to me the degree to which that was a thing. And then turns out the Dogs on Acid forum had a bunch of people using my plugins very much the way that I would have them be used. I thought that was really cool. So I dropped by, I said hello, I said, hey, I love you back. And have taken to posting my plugins in their feedback forum where people post links to their recent tracks. Seemed like the most appropriate spot. If they tell me to move them or do something else, I shall. But yeah, we are here to do some plugin coding, so I can switch immediately over to that. And I'll get into, I think, Galactic, which is... This is where we left off. It is a variation off of the Verbity plugin. And I seem to have a variety of stuff going on here. I'm not exactly sure what I'm even looking at anymore. Oh, I know what this was about. So the deal with Iron Oxide Classic 2 is I was adapting it from what it originally was, put out maybe as many as 3 years ago, one of the early Patreon-based plugins. And what I did is I took it exactly the way that it was, but I made some adjustments because I wasn't happy with how it was handling high sample rate stuff. The whole idea was to adapt it to the stuff I'm putting into Verbity and Galactic and so on, where the higher sample rates will undersample. They'll do 1 and 2 or 1 and 4 when the tone is meant to be kind of dark in the first place. And when I did that, I found that switching to higher sample rates at, say, high tape speeds in Iron Oxide Classic 2 was striking differences in gain level. So I started digging into the things where the gain levels were strikingly different and removing some of the adjustments. And turns out one of the things that happened, Here, I can demonstrate that. First, I'll take this away. I could demonstrate that with this drum clip. So this is a drum clip. Copy that over from recent stuff I've done. And what I can do is throw the new version of Iron Oxide Classic on there. And you can see at a fairly regular setting, this is not wildly different. But it was getting so that it would really get buried at higher sample rates. And so what I did was some adjustments, and one of the side effects is this. At very low tape speeds, you start getting a lot of additional gain going into low frequency sounds. It acts like it's sort of got a, you can pad it a bit. But you can hear it's very different. It is. It gets kind of huge. And there's an additional thing which is consistent with the previous one. You can trash it to the point where it's like wavefoldy, like this. Now, some of the people that are working with this might find that that is actually, that they like it this way. And I could easily be one of them. As far as I'm concerned, this seems fine. But there is a case to be made for how that's different. Funny thing is, it's not. The original version of Iron Oxide Classic has a sine-based distortion factor. And to the best of my memory, let's go and look at it. We've got the screen up, so we can do that. Open recent project, go to the AU, and we'll have a look. And you can see that as it's going in, it's doing this high pass, and then it's going in. Oh no, hang on. I lie, it's not actually doing that at all. So when the guy said that it was acting like it was wavefolding, that's not actually true. This stops it from being wavefoldy. When we're clamping the bridge rectifier thing, and this is an alternate way of doing it. I've done this in a variety of different ways. This is the same way that it was when it started. But this, and I think this might have been when I thought sine only worked in one direction, which it does not. You can put negative values into sine and it does the same thing. This is actually clamping it. And then on the output, I'm pretty sure I've got the same thing going. Yep. Okay, so fair enough. As it happens, the fellow who said, oh, this sounds like it is wavefolding was mistaken, because it absolutely is not. But point being, it is the same algorithms that it was from the beginning. It's just gain staged a little differently. So that combined with complaints about my video quality, and I thought that was kind of funny. Because like if I get a TV or something like that, I will do my level best to go through and calibrate it in such a way that it's not like, you know, Best Buy video settings with all of the saturation and contrast cranked up as high as you can possibly stand it. One of the videos, the channels that I watch, has been falling in this direction recently, and I'm not really sure why. I catch React videos from Andy and Alex at times, and increasingly they have gone to this oversaturated, wildly contrasty look that I find kind of cheesy. Whereas another YouTuber that I watch, Daydream Sound, Johans, when he does video of actual footage, he'll generally cut the contrast down and throw a color cast on and have a very aesthetic approach to it. So for the iron oxide thing, I had a lot of lighting going on. As always, I continue to fool with all these things as I go. And I ended up having a pretty fully lit, not wildly contrasty look, and immediately got flack from that on Gearsuds. I say Gearsuds because what it says when I go to the site is now Gearsz, because they've amended the naming of that. And I can see why. Makes sense. So I'm not sure they've settled on an answer, so I'm just calling them Gearsuds because I can. So that's always a thing. Like you work up a new plugin that can do different things, or it's a different version that's meant to handle certain stuff. I think I successfully made it so that, because I was using my 3 different sample rates of Alien Kittens to test it out, and I got it so that if you were running at 44.1K and you had a sound going and you switched to 192K, it acted basically the same. And it did this by stripping out a lot of the gain trim. And apparently this causes problems for some folks who are using the previous version, which is why it's a good thing that I don't replace versions when I put out a new version. Instead, you get to have both. Both can be there. Or you can get rid of one, or just only use the most recent, or whatever, but you get to run both. So yeah, and then I got told that I was doing oversampling wrong because all of my plugins need to oversample individually inside themselves. And I was like, nope. If everybody else is doing the thing, then everybody else is wrong. Oops. So that was fun in a sense. But at the same time, it's also like you wake up to the response to a plugin release and it's just a pile of complaints. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and do something else now. All right. I'm going to go and do Galactic. We took this rather far last week. So what I'm thinking is this might be a fine day to not put in, 3 or 4 hours, unless it gets really inspiring for some reason. I wouldn't rule that out, but let's just finish this up so that we can have it next Sunday. And I'll post this next week. And we shall see, which involves experimenting with it and seeing how it's working. And then also trying to second guess if there are problems that are coming up that people are going to immediately complain about. And could there be problems coming up that are supposed to be there? Because this is meant to be like an instrument. If you have, say, a violin, and I've got a violin over in the corner there. If you have a violin, you could consider it to be a problem that you can't play a in-tune note on the sucker for the life of you unless you practice for many years. But that's part of what makes the violin be a violin. It makes it be the instrument that it is. My wood stove just made a noise, but it seems harmless. I might have to run off and tend to the wood stove. So I just this morning made a post to the Dogs on Acid forum. I just this morning made a post to the Dogs on Acid forum where people were looking for 1-sentence music production tips, and most of them were very funny. It was a bunch of jokes. But I brought one that I take very seriously, which is if the thing that you're making is not pissing somebody out there off so badly that they hate you and it, and they're really angry with you for doing the thing the way that you did it, if you're not able to make that happen, the thing that you're doing is not enough of itself yet. Like, you're not done. You're not done until your thing is so distinct that it's making somebody mad who is coming at it from a completely different point of view. And I'm generally comfortable with that kind of thing. So I posted that into that forum, and hopefully it will be its own kind of inspiring for people. But that's going to be the case for Galactic, because the thing is, I've already put out Verbity. Verbity has its own issues. I've actually fixed one of them just yesterday. If you had a copy of Verbity and you might consider trying to run it at like 384K or something, which I consider very silly. But if you think you might be running it at like 384K or something like that, I did a brief and small bug fix that doesn't affect the sound under normal circumstances. And what it does, here, I'll show you. Let's open it up. So here's Verbity, and I'll show you the thing that I did. I added this line of code. Previously it had this other stuff, and if the cycle end was less than 1, it would always be 1, and if it was 192K, you'd get 4. I'm pretty sure that is also the case with well, we're starting at 44.1K, so that theoretically will go to 88 or 176, and then going one step beyond is going to get you the same because it's an integer, so it will only go to 4. But then, oh, exactly the same thing, Loth. If music pisses somebody off, you're probably doing it right. There's bound to be somebody out there who cares enough about how music is made that anything that you do that it, like, think of Gabber music or like retro jazz or who knows what, you know, Schlager from Germany. There is bound to be something out there or somebody out there for whom any given thing, no matter what it is, music, programming plugins, video games, fan fiction, doesn't matter, anything. There's going to be somebody out there who is really angry with you for doing it unless what you've done is so bland that nobody cares. And that's the thing to be worried about. You don't want it to be so bland that nobody cares. You want it to be whatever it is, fervently enough that when somebody just differs with what the thing is, then they become furious at you and really mad, not just at the thing, but at you for daring to do it that way. And that is emotionally damaging and difficult to cope with, and it's a struggle, but at the same time it is your tip-off that you're doing something that is distinct. You're doing something that is sufficiently itself. And I feel almost like there's an exemption there where, you know, don't try to do that on purpose. Like if you're doing music and then you're just going, I'm going to put this in just to make these people mad, well then that's kind of lame. It should be stuff that is sincerely meant. The point being that you do stuff that is sincerely meant and you do it as hard as you can. And if you're doing that properly, somebody out there is going to get mad at you for it. It's the internet. What do you want? It is the world, and the size of the world means that somebody is going to hate you for anything that you do that is not just blandness and nothingness. But anyway, to get back to Verbity, as you see here, we've got this line of code, and this now stops it changing the downsampling behavior once you get to 176 or 192K. Instead, what you get is if you go beyond, it just sticks at 4, meaning that if you did 384K or whatever, it would start scaling the pitch of things up subtly. And if you manage to do, like, you were rendering your program, you were rendering your music, and you decided to render it at 2.8 megahertz because you decided that that was going to be better because it was more, then Verbity would be rendered strange because it would be doing this, but the downsampling would act really differently. But it wouldn't crash, because before, if you had cycle end higher than 4, I'm pretty sure that what we've got here, and it'll go up to this point and cycle plus plus, so you'd have values that were larger, and it's only going to check on, I guess formerly what would happen is it would straight up not, it would do something messy. What time did I start? Oh, so maybe 5 minutes early, if that. I just got rolling because I could. Like, I had my video stuff working, and I was like, okay, let's roll. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the previous version of Verbity would have done with 384K, but I put in a bug fix. So now, if you try to do that, instead you're going to get something that does actually work, and it's at the highest available sample rate, which I think is preferable to what it was before, which was something a little bit weirder, and I just hadn't covered that base. And that is also the case, I believe, for Galactic. Let's go and check. Yep. Here's Galactic, same code, and we've got that covered. So again, what I've got here in Galactic is the idea of a sort of deep space plugin where we can have a kind of sustaining thing going on. And we can manipulate the darkness effect. This might be a good place to see what the meter is doing there. This might be a good place to put in the trim thing where it can't actually go to literally 1.0. Instead, if it's at 0.999, that is still letting through some subsonic information. But I can make it, let's fix that now. That's something that's worth looking into. And I can do that by managing this regen a little differently. Let's do it in 2 phases. And not actually instantiate a new value. I don't feel that's necessary. But what we can do is so now we got regen equals get parameter kparam2 and regen equals 0.0625 plus regen times 0.0625. Actually, hang on, what am I doing? It's the low pass I'm concerned about. What am I even doing? Let's undo that back out of there. Because regen, it is daylight savings time again, Bo, I'm sorry. Yeah. That I learned about that myself on Saturday. I was like, oh, geez. So here we go. Yeah, what am I saying? It's low pass that I want, not regen. Let's do the same thing. I'll do 2 copies of this. And I'll instantiate it first as itself, and then handle it this way. The point being to, let's see. Yeah, it goes to 0 in its most extreme setting. So when I turn it all the way up to 1, that is, here, there's an alternate way I can do this too. Let's undo out of that as well, because here's the thing. I'm wanting it not to go all the way to 0. If it goes all the way to 0, it can lock in DC information in the filter. And we're trying to avoid that. But 0.999 or whatever is still valid. So one thing we can do there is to have it be trying to figure out whether this is going to break something. Like if I was going to go 1.09, that would mean it can't go down to 0 anymore, because you can only subtract 1 out of get parameter kparam3. That's doing a 0 to 1. But that means the highest settings are now larger than 1, and that's not necessarily good, because what we're doing with it is, here's our low pass, 1.09 to the second power is going to be even slightly larger than that, and then divided by the square root of overall scale. That's going to be presumably typically 1 or something like that at a low sample rate, and a higher sample rate that's going to change more. It's probably worth me examining how that works in multiple sample rates. Joko Sekovan, yeah, it's according to floating point numeric representation. That's what's going to happen to you if you do that. So let's see, IR would be 1 minus low pass plus input sample. So at the maximum value, we'll have a slightly boosted one, and then the other. Tell you what, let's try it. Let's go and try it and find out what we get. We'll do this 1.09, although that's not correct, just to see what we get. We'll build it, and we'll see whether it does anything ugly. And strangely, this is not updating the output to the different sample rates correctly, but that's fine, not so concerned about that. What it will do will be consistent anyhow, so let's see. And we do have it so that the input level is being scaled down by this, so that when we have that going on, it's acting as an infinite sustain, and we can modulate this to play it as an instrument. That's the idea. Is it blowing up? I'm thinking, no, it actually is not. Oh, I remember what this was about. Pitch amount is the pitch shift that I have making it spread, because the verbity doesn't spread at all. You can hear it really freaking out. You can hear it going up and down. And it's not actually breaking, so I'll tell you what, that means that this is a fine tactic to use for this. we can go to additional amount, and that will probably trying to figure out where this sits in the oh, I remember that. Be nice. Don't be using terms like that in my chat. But I know exactly who you're referring to, and that was very amusing because the fellow came and was like, I'm going to lecture everybody about how wrong Chris is doing it. And the funny thing was how people didn't feel a need to like charge to my defense in particular, just whatever. And yeah, that fellow does plugins. And oh, have we gone silent? Hang on. I'm assuming that I'm still coming. Yeah. No sound from the audio source here. I don't know what you mean by that. But yeah, they were trying to do something else, and they had strong opinions about how all reverbs needed to have mid-side processing and an EQ. And of course, I'm like, no, because my stuff is sort of more modular. If you wanted to have an EQ, you should pick one and use that. That's why there's multiple spaces for plugins in the channel strip. But yeah, and no, I'm afraid you were fooled. He is not knowledgeable about DSP. The code that he posted was kind of silly. There was some very funny stuff going on in that code. Somebody quoted a bit of it, like, oh yeah, very, very serious. It's tricky. But the thing which I felt like in hearing this fellow talking about that stuff reminded me of me like 20 or 30 years ago. Oh, the plugin well, the thing about the plugin test is it's coming out of my speakers, so you're going to have to hear it, and it's probably just too quiet. Let's see now, what were we doing? Low pass gets to have this. We can do that. Nothing's going to really change, so I don't actually have to test it. If it worked before, it'll work now. I was trying to test whether or not having it be a very high value here, higher than I was going to end up with. Oh, I do know something I could test, though. Let's build that, copy it over, and then test the thing that I know that I need to test, which is we'll do the louder drum kit and get a loud sound going and see if we can trap DC. Well, hang on. This is not the audio I'm going to want to use. I'm going to want to use this. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I am going to want to use the previous one. Don't mind me. This is sometimes what it's like. Just trying to get through. Yeah, this part is fine, and I will want to have loud sound going, but it's the low pass I'm testing. So what we want is a loud noise, and then roll the darkness down. And is it going to slowly drain away until we no longer have a DC voltage in there? And the answer appears to be yes. Not quickly, mind you, but it does appear as if that's going to work. And also I can't hear it, so that's kind of what I was looking for. I'm trying to get it so that I can bring stuff in. I'm a little concerned about the scaling here. This doesn't seem right. Like, all this range that seems to do nothing, and then incredibly delicate adjustment over here. This is not what I want. I wanted to have a wider range of dark adjusting over here up to a maximum up here. So let's look into that, because I know that's not right. I know that's not what I want. I'm also a little concerned about this divided by square root overall scale. I feel like that is going to force me into certain kinds of low passes at different sample rates. But I'm already working at a sample rate, so I'm already working at 2x. So probably fine. So here's the deal. I need the low pass to balance out differently. If I'm getting DC, well, the thing is that the DC is simply because this filter is getting locked into a voltage because it doesn't change anymore. Galactic is a version of Verbity. Galactic is the version of Verbity where we have a pitch bend. That means mono input coming in will be spread and make a wide stereo effect. Because otherwise it would not. It would just sit forever at whatever place you put it in the stereo field, much like Verbity will do. And the previous plugins, I'm trying to figure out whether I need to put another log on the fire. Maybe I do. The previous plugins before Verbity did spread stuff in the stereo image. And Verbity, since it doesn't do any pitch bending of any kind and still makes the reverb sound good, doesn't do any of that. So we're now adding a pitch bend in the input. This is Vibam drift and pre-delay that applies vibrato. And the vibrato is Vibam or Vibam plus pi divided by 4. I could calculate that out too. Yeah, that guy, easy with the language. Again, I got to tell you, this is a guy who might end up doing stuff like me, because he's got the arrogance going on and he has the need to be doing stuff better than everybody else. He just needs to learn that not all of his ideas are good. But I'm sure you are correct about which guy you're referring to. But yeah, Jazz, the thing about this is a IIR filter. In fact, I'll show it to you. We're doing like low pass here, and it's filtering it, and this is the bit that it's doing. This is in 2 channels, so here's one channel, here's another. I've also put in this here for controlling for denormalized numbers. And that should help the efficiency of the plugins. I'm throwing in many more of those than I used to ever since I did some recent plugin and discovered that it was crashing like crazy on my main machine because it had some IIR filters in there. IIR filters are constructed like this. We've got one right here. So this is the output of it, and this is how we make it. And we're doing it by going IR is equal to itself times 1 minus low pass plus the new information coming in times low pass. So they're going to go in opposite directions. And if you have low pass at a level of 1, that's like no filtering at all. Every time you get a new sample coming in, it completely replaces what was there before. And so there's no filtering whatsoever. If you get 0.5, you're taking half of what was there before and putting the new information on top of it and combining them. And then so on. So since it's infinite impulse response, if you put one tick in there, it would keep being like half as loud as it was every sample and just go like that forever. Now if you have low pass of 0.0001, what you'll get is the old sample sticking around and then a tiny amount of whatever new thing is coming in. And that'll build up a bassier sound, because if a series of samples coming through are all sort of on one positive or negative side of the swing, that will push this IR in that direction because it's not reversing itself much. It's just staying in the one side. And so that can build up into this IR filter and it'll hang on to that for longer. Now, when you've done that, you've got information in the IR filter. Suppose you put it to literally 0. If you have low pass be literally 0, IIR will stay at exactly what it was the previous time, plus absolutely nothing. So it will just stay forever. And that is correct. You have just turned the filter down to DC, so it's going to continue to have whatever it is that it had, but it's not useful for musical purposes because we wind up having that DC building up to the point where this is an unwanted behavior. It's like if you have the delays hanging onto something for infinite sustain, that's more interesting. But if you have essentially a low-pass filter hanging on to a voltage for infinite sustain, that's just a voltage now. That's not useful at all. So what we do is we make sure that low pass is not ever literally 0. And that's what we're doing here, meaning that we don't have to put an additional filter after it. We don't have to put a high-pass filter after it if we just stop it from doing that thing. And that's what we're doing right here, where we went from 1.0 to 1.00001. 00001. Actually, no, there's an 001, but it's here. And that stops us actually running into that problem in the first place. If we zoop it down to 0, then basically nothing will happen. Now the question is, what's happening with this low pass that we're not getting the desired result? And I'll tell you, when you are doing POW get parameter kparam3, to the power of 2, what's happening is the stuff on the 0 to say 0.5, the smaller the value is, the smaller it's going to get. If you're up at 1, that's not actually going to change. So it's putting a taper in, it's putting in like a logarithmic taper into it. But when we do 1 minus that, our small adjustments aren't doing much. The taper is going to stay at the place on the control that it lives. Like if you do POW get parameter kparam3, comma 2, this thing that I'm highlighting right here. If you do this, that's always going to make the taper lean towards smaller values because it's doing a and our problem is we're reversing that. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We need to move this a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, now it will work. And in fact, I can also remove some parentheses here. I'll test out this overall scale stuff later. What I should have done now is it will do the same thing as far as this end is bright, this end is dark. And moving the 1.001 to the different place means that now the taper is going to go in the opposite direction. Let's test it and find out whether that worked. I can also exaggerate it by making it be a larger power, but I'll test it and find out if it worked. This is very simple stuff, but it's simple stuff that is only simple once you've started doing it. I'm generally not worried about talking people through very basic concepts like that. And let's see, we need to let some sound in. And it does appear to have worked. We have a filter. And we can bring darkness up out of this extreme range. Darkness of 1 is... And we just reversed where the power calculation was. That means we can fade out of this darkness effectively. This is what I was after. I just had that subtract in the wrong place. And this is about as bright as I'm going to want it, although I need to test that it does something sensible at different sample rates. Which I think it might. It might just automatically do fine. But these are the controls I'm looking for. I'm looking for being able to make it dark like this. Or dial in the longness. That's interesting. I can fool with it while longness is happening. We're just buffer smashing at this point. The pitch change only affects stuff going into the reverb. I can demonstrate that like this. As I increase pitch amount, you should be able to start hearing it doing something. If I had an actual pitch effect, that would do more. Want to hear what it does? Let's throw it on a sine. I'll show you the pitch change. This will also show me whether or not it's wildly out of sync if I go and revisit it this way. This is going to be loud. So here's the straight pitch. And as we increase pitch amount, it's kind of going up and down. And you can make it a lot more extreme. Although I am a little concerned. Let's test this against something else while we're at it. I'll shut that off. And I'll put on one of these drum tracks. And we'll do a dry wet and see how much latency this has added to it. Because that's the thing. If I have it set up like this, I can kind of hear the amount of delay it is. Of course, on a really long delay, it's pretty much just adding a bunch of sustain. But that is after the pitch shift, so that's after this pre-delay, which is causing the pitch shift. So let's see what we get. I don't know, I feel like it is not exactly a fixed LFO. I'm experimenting with it a little bit right now. I'm trying to see whether I can get it to be flangey. But I think I have a little bit too much delay on there to make it be flangey. It can arguably be slightly chorusy. In fact, that is definitely a thing that could be done with it. In fact, let's try it on something that's like a melodic thing of some kind. What could we use? What's this sawtooth? What does this do? Well, that's a note. I'm not quite sure why it has that fade there, but that's a good way of experimenting. You lock stick. So what the pitch bend is doing is applying increasing amounts of a very small volume to sort of push around the pitch on a dual sine calculation that's like a quadrature calculation. The left and the right are like a quarter cycle out or a half cycle out. So what you get is, let's see. That gives me 3 sounds, middle, which is direct, and then the left and the right are different. And then as we increase it, we start getting more of an offset. And then as we make it more extreme, the sides are getting more freaky. Yeah, you're talking about David Pixley. So one thing I could do is dial back the space so that it starts cycling faster. It ain't really a super saw because it's like just 3 signals, but one of them is the center, and then there's 2 side ones, and they're different pitch offsets. So it's acting kind of like that. I tell you what, while I'm thinking about this, let me go and throw another log on the fire. It's really cold out in Vermont right now. It's going to warm up pretty soon, but it's still being really cold at the moment. And I'll throw another log in here just to get things cranking faster. There, I ought to carry it for a while. So yeah, what we're going to do is look into this a little bit. I feel like it would be nice to have pitch amount also start ramping up the vibrato, because what we hear, I got the wrong mouse in my hand. The regular one is all well and good. This starts to be a nice kind of spread effect. But it feels as if when I ramp it up that much, as it gets more extreme, it should start going faster. And it's not. Although I could also test it on different sample rates. Let's try Alien Kittens and see what we get. Because I'll quickly try that on some wildly different sample rates and do a couple of experiments, see what happens. That's about a quarter note different. That's about where that pitch was. Come on, you close. And now we'll quickly bounce off of the 192K version and see how different that is. Sounds about the same. It sounds as if these are adapting reasonably well to the sample rates, because the way we do that is these various parameters all through here do different things, and in order to adapt the sample rate, I got to work on this overall scale or work on the sample rate that I'm being given, and then any parameter that's different needs to be adjusted, like the low pass is it's being divided by a square root overall scale, but it could also be divided by overall scale. I believe what I'm doing there is going to make it darken slightly slower, but it's giving me about the same adjustments, really. So let's see, what are we looking at? Drift and delay M. Delay M equals 1024. So we can adjust delay M on the fly. Let's do something. Actually, we'll do something with one of the other parameters just so we can see what it's like. Capitals, like we. There we go. Times let's make it really aggressive. So now what we've got is delay M, and if parameter 6 is at 0, it's the same as we had before, but as we make parameter 6 larger, that delay buffer starts getting smaller. And what that should do is tighten up the amount of space it has to modulate in, and that will make the pitch bending vibrate quicker if I'm getting this right. Let's see whether I'm getting this right. Oh, got to quit out of the program first. There we go. And we'll fire up that sawtooth wave and see what happens. having a look at my wood stove. It seems to be perking up nicely. I might be revisiting that in a moment. So here we have our pitch bend. Now if we increase this, oh no! Okay, I don't know what this is, but it's awesome. Terrifying. Terrifying. Okay, so I think what's going on there is simply that I already have a pretty short delay. So all I'm really doing is smashing the buffer somehow, and it's clearly not doing what I thought it was gonna. So let's explore that a little bit. So delay M, 1024, and that is actually not the longest delay time. That was fun, but it wasn't sensible. So we're trying to make delay M, and if we start making it be a smaller delay time on the fly, we get horrible, terrible results. Let's find out why so that we can either use it or fix it. I wasn't expecting that, and it's such an aggressive sound that's kind of horrifying. So restarting this, we don't need these because that is such a small if statement. It's consistent with this now. So offset M. Oh, I better know why. This is a fixed amount. If instead we made this be half a delay M, then it'll start acting, oh, I can do stuff like that all day long. Don't worry about it. If I want to make that happen again, I can. So our maximum available offset is now a factor of delay M rather than offsetting to outside the range that we have. At that point, now we figure out whether this is actually going to do what I thought it was going to do. And we actually had a smaller setting for that, so let's incorporate that, just in case having it set too high does something. That should stop the crazy grindy noise. If I control somebody made an unofficial Airwindows wiki, it's possible. If you're talking about Beat Druid, no, that was mine and it died. Nobody did anything with it and I couldn't really maintain it and it stopped. And then it got bombed by spammers and it just sort of put it out of its misery because it was unusable. Nobody was there to maintain it or to see whether spammers were finding ways of filling the entire thing with advertisements, and so it just kind of went down. Let us take a moment to try this before getting back into that conversation. Joko, take it easy, man. My grandma's name was Kakayaman. My grandma's name was Eiley. I have Finch blood. That's why I drive my Subaru the way that I do. Now, okay, so all that making the buffer smaller does is give me less effect. It's not actually making it go any faster. Although I will say this, if I made this bigger, let's see, where were we at? Size, regen, attenuate, dry, wet. Okay, here's where we get it. If I make this 10 times bigger, here's what happens. I'll have a really extreme pitch change. We'll fire up Sawtooth again. We can probably survive having this part be a little buffer grindy. I think that's probably not too harmful. Jess, I would say that, yeah, I tend to code in primarily 99.9% C because that's what the plugin frameworks are in. And although they're in C++, I'm not really using those parts of the language. I'm basically coding C in C++. So now here's what we get. If we have the, oh, hang on. If we have this going on, we can make it be a much bigger offset. But if we have it a tiny little buffer, we can go to a faster modulation. So those kind of track. That's getting me relatively good behavior, having them set the same. Like, what bit of code is the pitch shift? I'll show you. We've got these two things in here. This is now 10 times more effective than it was before. Although I can make that be pretty close to 10 times more effective and have it be, now if I put the 9 back to 1, it'll be back to what it was. And this is setting the size of the delay buffer. Beedruid was the official wiki. It is not there. It got attacked by spammers and filled with garbage, and I don't really know how to administrate wikis in that way, so it is not there. What bit of code is the pitch shift? Pitch shift lives here. Also here. So the way that works is, this is the value that is fluctuating. This is the LFO basically. And it's being increased by the amount that drift is. Then these are the delay buffers, and this is the input sample coming in. And then we read off of the output of the delay buffers here, which is this stuff. And offset is a sine wave based on this LFO here, and it's making a delay buffer move within the size of that. Working ML and working MR is the spacing in the existing delay buffer as it goes, plus that offset. And then we're reading a value out of the delay buffer, and then we're also interpolating between the nearest two samples. So that smooths stuff out a little bit. It's not in the feedback loop though, so it's not going to darken infinite sustains, but it's going to interpolate and smooth stuff off just a little bit. And that makes it a pre-delay that applies vibrato, like that. And we have just done the thing that was in this note for myself. Check on Alien Kittens 192 to see what high rate is like. That's fairly important so that I can know whether it will work under those circumstances. I can also change the sample rate of like the sawtooth and stuff and see what I get out of that. Let's also quickly test and see whether this smashes things. Times delay M times 0.5. I might make it click or sputter if I do this. So I'm going to see whether that's true or not. But yeah, I had it so that if I do this, for instance, we are now changing delay M to be a smaller overall cycle of delay based on how fast the vibrato is going. And that seemed to work fairly well. So we'll see whether we get anything useful out of it or whether we just broke something unexpectedly. Go with our sawtooth again. Oh, there is a Facebook group run by a guy named Tiki Haria who that is entirely its own thing, and I do not have control over it. In fact, I'm not on Facebook anymore. I bailed off of Facebook, and I bailed off of Twitter, and I bailed off of Discord. Just because I thought they were kind of bad. Well, that's interesting. So a bunch of horrible noises, but that's usually the way when I start fooling with stuff. We're going to see what we get if we do 1024 minus not such an extreme effect. Instead, we'll call it like minus 512. Because the thing about this is, in some ways, we don't. All that's doing is coupling the faster vibratos more tightly to the raw sound, but that's not necessarily relevant for this plugin. So I'm wondering about that one now. We can also scale this down a touch, I think. We still got some delay buffer smashing, but that might be fine. We'll see. Because one of the things we're trying to do is make it so that if we go to the faster vibrato speeds, it isn't just completely wildly out of control. That also means that the incredibly slow vibrato speeds, they need to be more of a wander. You won't actually hear it as a LFO at all. And, well, here, let me show you. I'll try to fire that up again. Can I do pitch shifting in semitones? Nope, not with Galactic. There's Glitch Shifter that can do stuff like that, although it's a little strange. And there is a pitch shifter plugin that I need to try out. I'm wondering if maybe I'm overthinking this. Let's put that back. Let's put this back. Or maybe, no, I'm thinking maybe that's fine, but maybe I just want to and delay m as an integer, so why am I putting decimal points in there? Fiddling with little things here and there. Well, the thing is, I'm not so concerned about making it sound more analog. I'm trying to fill pitch space in a consistent way. In what will end up being an infinite sustain space. Like, I can show you that too. I guess this is as good as any. Let's leave that there. We'll fire up that sawtooth wave again. There's something I could try. So the idea is, rather than have it sit at something like this, which doesn't sound that big, you need to be able to put something in so that it starts making bigger space. That said, Jess, you gave me an idea. There's something I could try that might work out just fine. Because there is still a regularity to this. I'm not completely convinced that that's best, but you know what? Guess what I have? FPDL and FPDR. These are sitting around being random values. They're generated by the stereo floating point dither. So that's going to be a random number that is extremely large. And what I could do is drift can be I can just add a random number because it's there. All I have to do is a single multiply, and then drift has to be a lot smaller than it is. Let's give it room to be incredibly, incredibly small, because this is probably going to give me bursts of insane noise for starters. But let's find out. And the idea is I'm scaling down this number, which could be quite large, so way larger than it needs to be. And it's multiplied by drift, so that'll be from 0 to tiny, tiny number. And there's going to be like 9 or more decimal places in FPD. So in theory, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have a wander effect, and I can dial it in by experimenting with it. And it's probably not going to make things any louder because it's just modulating the LFO. Not so much. I'm trying out Jazz's thing, because the thing about it is this is not going into the output of it. This is what's modulating that sine. Set pitch and amount 0. We've already got that going on. And that's what we get when we start adding it. Although it's kind of averaging out. Yeah, so that's not going to work, and I'll tell you why. That is a random value, and I am able to add it, but we're going through one of those every single sample, so they're averaging out. We're not hearing the differences. What we need to do is re-trigger this with the new FPDL every time we recycle. So here's what we need to do. We need a new stored variable. What would be a suitable place to put that, I wonder? We'll call it old FPD because we're going to be replacing it at a given time. We're going to start it out at that number. And we're going to go I hear wind throwing my chimney around. It is rattling. Oh, huh. Did I have a backup of Detroit? I don't remember. Anyways, back to this. See what I did there? Now every time the sine wave cycles around, it changes the speed. Each new cycle is a different speed rather than it constantly being modulated by a really fast fluctuating random thing. So we'll see what this gives us. This is going to be different. How different? I don't know, but it's going to be different. Also, I could add a couple of more zeros in here. Mind you, it's not necessarily different in a good way. We're going to find out real quick whether it's different in a good way or whether it's just another pile of mess. But this should be modulating by the random factor. Okay, now it's not able to modulate at all. Maybe I took away from those zeros too quickly. What were we in fact doing? Vibam plus equals old FPD, which could be any number of things. Oh, I can tell you one thing that would be inevitably happening. If old FPD was 0, Vibam doesn't move at all and we never get around to recalculating it. So that's a concern. Let's fix that this way. There, now drift can occupy 2 sizes. This is probably still not going to help, but I'll handle that too. Random number. See why I did that? Oh, hang on. So drift is going to be a really small number and FPD goes rather high. So what we're going to do is make a... No, I can do that even easier. Hang on. Bear with me. So we had this, right? So if we just straight up pick a number, not that big of a number, and just straight up add it, let's see what we get. Let's see whether we have something that falls over and dies again or not. That was startling. Okay. So that's what it does now. In fact, it's going to continue to do it. And I'll tell you why. We are modulating the cycle speed of the sine that is doing the pitch bend here. And when that cycle speed gets extreme enough, what happens is it starts going into a very random modulation. But when we get to something that is almost zero in whatever way, and that can also be if we are using this variable, FPD, it's meant to wrap. The random source FPD is meant to cycle around, and if you add or multiply it or whatever, it can flip over beyond the maximum range that it has into another variable. And that's consistent with how I'm using it. So I'm sort of smashing the buffers of that variable size itself. So what's happening is I'm getting too wide of a range. And every time it gets stuck to nearly zero, so we can restrict that by doing this. Whenever we recycle, now we are going to, we don't need the parens for this because it's a very simple expression. I like putting them in places, but not here. That's going to make FPDL be either 0. I'm assuming it doesn't go negative. Let's have a look at the H file. Unsigned integer, so it does not go negative. It is an integer variable. Why am I saying valuable for everything? Oh my God. A little more coffee. Just stop saying valuable every 2 seconds. If I can't fix these bugs, it's not going to be very valuable at all, will it? Having a random space in it is not valuable either. Let's just keep manipulating this. I've got this times 0.0001, and then it's plus 10,000, and I can keep increasing that. The more I increase it in both of these sides, the less the dynamic range of the random number will happen, and the more the basic offset is going to be. And then, of course, drift is being manipulated by this, which is twice the size of all of those. And I can scale the overall effect up and down this way. I'm tempted to put this back to 1024 just because I can. I know that's the size of my buffer, so we'll see what we get out of this. Back into the breach, let's see what we got. You know, without getting too into it, Joko, I will have to say that the reason I am Chris from Airwindows is because I have led a lifestyle much like yours. start to sputter. We still got too much of a range on there, but we can make the whole thing have slightly more effect. Let's ramp this up a little bit. I'm trying to get a more irregular sort of vibrato, and my range is far too great. Like, the vibrato is going from incredibly little change to quick bursts of lots of crazy change and then back to really slow again, which is not what I'm looking for. So back into the reach again. I could do the sine waves if you're getting tired of this sawtooth. What I really need is just to... Okay, here we go. We got something going on. I'm not hearing a variation. It's kind of cool, but I'm not hearing a variation. Let's get out of there and modulate this. I could start putting in calls to some of these sliders if I felt like it. Right now, I'm just iterating. I keep hearing a little noise in there, which is probably it hitting a high value. Keep getting a funny noise in there. I'm not sure this is working. I wanted to make it work, but I'm not sure this is working. Like, you understand what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to take this random value that's in here and update it only when the cycle goes round, and it determines how fast the next cycle goes round. But it's not being particularly cooperative, that's the thing. So that's kind of puzzling. So yeah, coffee's gone. So how can we manipulate this cycle that is the sine wave that is being updated by a variable? I hit myself for keeping on saying what is so damn valuable. None of this is valuable. It's all a pile of crap. We're updating the sine wave as it goes around, and I'm having a lot of trouble coming up with something that is enough of a variation on it without being too much of a variation on it. And part of the reason is what I was running across before. If I have it doing random speed cycles and the cycle can go down to like 0, that means its cycle just stops at that point, and then you no longer have any variation. If it can go incredibly fast, you wind up getting just a burst of horrible noise, and that is also not useful. So we need to find a middle ground that is still affecting. Like, let's go back to old FPD is just equal to FPDL. Because the whole problem is coming up with the way of setting this maybe I'll fire up this is probably way too small of a number. That's the thing. Let's go and look up some numbers. We'll do this the hard way. We'll do this the sensible way. Unsigned integer 32. So I'm going to jump on the web for a moment here to do that. Fixed with integer types. Size of is the number of bytes. I don't care about that. And the maximum number is 9, 4, 9, 6, 7, 2, 9, 5. So that is the maximum size that could have been. I was nowhere near it. Oh, Jazz, thank you. Let's get back to our work. So here's what's going on. FPDL could be anything from 0 to this, which is, let's see, 967, 4,294 million. So yeah, I'm never concerned about whether we're all Patreon supporters in here. People will support me if they can, and if they feel that it is valuable. A lot of what I do is there to support people who are in no position to do likewise, because I feel like when I was younger and like broke and homeless and stuff like that, I would have liked people to be there supporting me. So, but we'll throw some more of that in there, and then times and let's calculate it out as a double precision, or whatever we've got here. And this is presumably going to give us half of the entire range this can be, and then old FPD is also going to be half of what the entire range can be. Or you can even do the same trick of making it a little smaller. Now, every time we hit a new cycle, we're picking something between half and full of what the random variation can be. And that might be enough. However, we might not have enough variation going on, so let's crank drift up a little bit. If I can get that sorted, I can quickly dial in what the range is meant to be. Back to our sawtooth wave. And what do we got? So now we've got a pitch bend that is fluctuating over a range of 2 times. So how's that? It's going to fluctuate between those 2 extremes. Mind you, that doesn't sound as much like random drift, but it does change stuff up a little bit. And if I now modulate the pitch amount, let's go for 100 times the range, and let's take this down to 512, so we maybe don't cover quite as much area. We'll build this again. Let's see where this took us. Okay. Those are strong words, Jess. I've just been fooling around with stuff for a lot longer than you. Which is a good reason enough for persistence. Let's scale this down in another separate way. All we really need to do is scale these things down a lot. So we'll make it be that. Oh, hang on. That is wrong. No, wait. No, I'm wrong. That is fine. In fact, I can just knock some of these decimal points off of here if I get it to a place where I'm satisfied with it. All right, let's go from here and see what we've got. I could have programmed some of these things into the sliders, but I'm not really concerned. On this older laptop, seeing as I don't have to reboot the machine every time, it's a pretty fast iteration. And we have a result. Oh, I know what's making the noise. That noise I keep hearing is just cycling. So that's cool, but it does still feel kind of regular. Like, wouldn't you agree? We were looking for something that acted more like a drift. This does not act like a drift. Instead, it acts like a vibrato that switches between two speeds, kind of. So let's see if we get anything sensible from stealing this and then no longer having to be concerned with old FPD. If we poke that in there, we are now updating it way more often. We can go back quite easily. The randomness is only pushing the LFO. The LFO is a quadrature offset, various of left and right. 3.141527, the rest of it, I'm not really sure. That's the kind of stuff I look up. I could have looked right here. It's written down right there. And in fact, I had it wrong, 159265. So fair enough. Some things I'm just not geared to do. Let's see what we have with this. Does this feel or act anything like a modulating vibrato, or is it just completely not doing that? I'm not interested in doing two different random thingies for left or right. I want them to be at a very fixed offset. I wouldn't mind having it not sound like a straight up LFO, but they need to be very fixed offset. Too regular. That's what I was trying to avoid. It's far too regular. Perlin noise is not going to help me here. So we're going to go back to this and see whether maybe we can get it to act nicer. Come to think of it, we don't have to do this math every time. That'll work just as well. So yeah, if we are cycling around enough, what happens if we do this? I feel like we're doing too many cycles, and that's why it sounds so damn regular, so maybe if I break that up a little bit. Too small. We'll make it be a more extreme effect so we can hear it more clearly. already. That's aggressive sounding. All right, interesting. Maybe let's try something else. Like, so these are still fairly balanced. If they were 0.5, it would be the largest range, but these are fairly balanced. And it's going between relatively slow and a lot faster, but if it was going between, I'm wondering whether I can get golden ratio going in here. And one of my challenges is that it's going to give me an irregular quality, but the modulation is always based on a sine. That's coming from down here. And that's what's giving me the smooth pitch offset. There's no roughness in there. So if our base value was still this, but then we had more random variation, it would be sitting on these slower ones more often and then going to these high frequency, high pitched warbles more aggressively. By the same token, if we had it a tenth as much randomness, that would make it be mostly very consistent. It would only fluctuate a little tiny bit. But if we had it be twice as much stability as randomness, that might dial it back to the point where it'll behave itself in some kind of useful way. So let's see what we got. Back to this. So this is now twice as much stability as randomness. I think we're starting to get somewhere. Yeah, don't tease fella from Moscow. I really like some of the techno music out of Moscow. There's some wonderful Russian techno out there, especially dub techno and your slower kind of stuff. And I would hate for people to blame everybody in America for some of the political stuff we've done, so just go gently with that stuff. Anyways, we're getting somewhere with this. Although there's a change I must make. Here's what's happening. This is sitting around forever before it actually updates, because We are doing this cycle that is based on, where did I find that? Where are you? You're up here. Old FTP times drift. Only when we reach this do we get a new old FTP value, which is always going to be this times 0.001, but we started old FTP at a different value, namely where did we hide that? Up here. This. So it starts out at this tiny value, and it only very slowly updates until it gets to the point where it can do its first real cycle, and then it starts going. If we make it be this, this is now our minimum value for what it's meant to be to start off with. Now it'll start up directly, because it's going to either be this or the random change that it's been added, which is half as much variation. If you're following me, I feel like I'm not expressing it very well, but this is what I'm trying to do. So now, when we do this, it will start up immediately, instead of slowly getting into it and then going bonkers. And it's doing a vibrato, but it's not perfectly consistent. Cool noise, kind of horrible, but cool. Well, this is kind of weird. I'm wondering now whether this is at least going to serve what I was originally trying to do. Because remember, I started out with a sine wave modulation, and like let's first of all see whether I can step this down. Is this going to make a nasty glitch, or am I fine with the vibrato going up to a maximum of pi? I guess we'll find out. And we have our golden ratio showing up again. Gotta love that. Slightly more irregularity than the 0.5 there. I think the golden ratio got me somewhere. At the super high speed, that now sounds a lot randomer. Okay, this is interesting. I get a pop when it does that. Snow Cloud, I have more than 200 VSTs, including choruses and flangers and things. So dig them up. Go on the Airwindows website and do searches for those names. You'll most likely find something. So yeah, one of my experiments here did not work. We're looking for full cycle rather than just the doo doo doo, because that causes a pop when it kicks in. But this part was fine. And let's see, this doesn't all fit on the screen very well, does it? And a delay M. Let's manipulate this again. This risks having me not able to modulate this while it's going, but it might be worth it. I'm trying to remember whether that was actually giving me anything useful. And then let's increase this. Or so how intense did that just get? Did I just throw it off completely? You know, with this cyclical thing, if I do anything that is not exactly, you know, pi for that, there will be a click or a pop when it cycles around, because it'll jump from one position on the pitch bend to another. Build that again. Oh look, I've gone over time for how much time I was expecting to spend. But that's okay. I'll get to a result of some kind, I feel. It takes people such a long time to get rolling with me, and it takes me such a long time to get up to speed with this stuff. We'll see how it goes. Gonna want to dial that down a little bit. At some point I'm going to just start manipulating this one as it goes. Like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's get a little quick sense of what we've got here. Too many points in number. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. That was too many decimal points. Clever little compiler. So how are we doing? Is this sitting at about the same space, or is it freaking out now? Dum-de-dum. we barely got anything going on at all, so let's try moving that decimal place. Hard to see the build succeeded message. If you delay other things, at one point I had a sample delay for audio unit, and it did negative delays. And the way it did negative delays was by declaring a big pile of latency and then not delaying as much as the latency said it should. So I tend not to do those things anymore. And now that's super regular. So I know just what to do. We'll put this back and make what? Where's my? Where was my cursor? Dang it! What do we got now? Things are starting to get a little sketchy here, so it might be time for me to log off. Also, something is not right here. We are no longer getting the offset that we're supposed to get. This one offset is VibM, and this offset is VibM plus this. Oh, maybe it's because I did this. Let's see what happens if we change that. Because that's definitely not what it started as. See, I don't want them to be literally going in opposite directions. I want them to be delayed somewhat. I'm looking for a very specific result, and I just stopped getting it, so that's my concern. I don't like the sound of the buffer scrunching. We're going back to something else. Let's go with a much smaller delay buffer. That will dial back the extremity of it more than a little bit. We'll just hard code that stuff in there. I think we're getting back our quadrature behavior. It's lagging a little bit when I try to put a new thing in. And back to this. So no modulation. We start bringing in the modulation, it gets bigger. That pop is the file cycling. There it is again. And we can push it hard enough to get a result out of it. And this is what we're shooting for, is the ability to hit a consistent note, but then if we start modulating it more, rather than being the utterly fixed note which doesn't sound big at all, which is what we hear here, we expand it out just a little bit, which will also make it wider. And as we increase putting that modulation, we change whatever the initial sound was into this wider effect. And then as we go back to a smaller one again, or smaller vibrato rather, we have a very wide stereo, but one that's a little more pitch centric. And then you can set it to infinite reverb or dial it right back to the raw input coming in. I think one more change and I'll call it acceptable. That would be getting into this drift and such. And let's make it be a different slope, so it'll kick in all the more slowly. let's see if we can't move all of this over a little bit. See whether we still get anything. So yep, now we got this one and a whole bunch of messy variables. It takes up so much space, I should probably go with the restating. Generally, they want you to do with statements like this. So we can rephrase it like that. And we can get it to be something like that. We've got our random number in here, which we don't actually have to do an additional random call because we have that already. And let's do a final build and see if this still works. And then we'll throw on another piece of music rather than just a sawtooth wave and see what it sounds like used in its initial, in its proper intention. If that's acceptable, we'll roll with it. So there's our maximum. At about 0.5, that's very reasonable. And it's very fixed on the correct pitch. We can spread it more by increasing longness, and of course if we go to longness of 1, we're no longer getting any new information coming in. It's just a pure sustain. Looking workable. I'm going to want to readjust the positionings of those sliders. Now let's throw something on. Here's one that kind of builds up from nothing. This is a track called Dawn out of the old album that I did back before anybody was buying any of my albums or doing anything. You're not going to hear anything but a bunch of noise if you do that. This does have some drums on it though. It starts out with a low frequency rumble, and then we start doing this. And there's a sustainy sound in there. And so this track continued to do this. So, and a lot of that was done with hardware synthesizers, by the way, like a Proteus one and stuff like that. So if we do that into Galactic, we get this. Let's crank it up a little bit for you. Journey through space. And here's how we do. Crank the pitch up crazy and throw a little more in. Take the pitch all the way down and replace what we've got here. Might be worth reversing this longness control and label it something like new information coming in. Little space dust there. I feel like this is sounding like Galactic plugin. The things that we're able to do with it are suitable. You just run any old thing into it and we get this going on. Or with the longness. I'm not sure what I would call a new information coming in slider though. Replace? High replace value. Low replace value. We'll do that. So regen is 1.0 minus get parameter param2, and we're going to rename that to replace as soon as we can find, there we go. That being part of the intention of how that even works. I'm also not sure how much use the bigness has, but I dare say it's okay having it still be there. Might not be the ideal thing for the top parameter though, especially since you don't want to be manipulating it on the fly without crashing. Not crashing the computer, but crashing the buffer. And we might as well call it dry wet, because there's no real point in saving it as the same behavior as it was before. Like, we don't need to do this or this. Because we're going to be full wet like all the time. So we don't need the same behavior as this. We can go back to some of the older expressions of it, which are not in Iron Oxide Classic, but might be in Channel 9. No, apparently not. Well, I know I got it tucked away in here somewheres. Oh, well, no, Evermatrix is different too. Where do I have my usual, normal, not unusual at all dry wet code? Let's go and find it in MacVST somewhere. Do I have dry wet in channel? Let's find out. Well, I'm creating a dry sample anyway. No, not so much. Geez, I would have sworn I had that in all kinds of plugins. Why am I not finding it now? Did I have it in average? Why am I looking in? Because it's going to be a stereo sample, that's why. Oh, there we go. So this is an older plugin, but it should still work. After the end filter, we're going to replace that stuff there. That's fine. And then this is, because it's better to not instantiate extra variables in modern processors because they can calculate faster than looking up another variable. So we're going to use wet for those things. And that replaces what we had here. And maybe a quick little check to ensure that that is still working. But I'm not going to move the controls around yet. I'll do that before posting. Here's a different one you haven't heard before. All right, so replace of no, darkness of no. Actually, I could reverse that too and have it be brightness. Maybe that would be good. Bigness is going to be down at the bottom somewhere. There's our dry wet. Detune. Yeah, darkness should be brightness. How do we implement that? Low pass. There, we have now implemented that. Are we using it anywhere else? No, I think that was it. I'm definitely going to need to move some of these things around. And it's not going to be named brightness in the VST because it won't let me have this many letters, but it might be fine. And a lot of these defaults are going to be readjusted as well, but we'll see. Alrighty, one more thing. It's almost 1:30. It's time for me to log off and go and take a nap, but actually no, let's pick this one. Recent effects, galactic, replace 0, brightness 0. Bigness, honestly, I feel like I could just leave it. I'm not sure what is to be gained from doing this kind of stuff with much smaller spaces, because I almost feel like the largest spaces are the only relevant ones, and there's no point having it set to anything else. But I don't know. Dry wet, detune, very good. Ready to roll. First, let's give it full brightness and sneak in a little bit of So here's our little journey through space as we start using this in the way that it was intended. Definitely getting more into that spacey zone. A little bit of rocket rumble. And ideally, the way this works is you could be doing this with any weird piece of music. Just widen that up a little bit. Very stereo wide too, that's the idea. You can make that go away. You can make it be very static, like this. Or let's crank up the detune for a moment. Stuff like this with more or less whatever input stuff you've got and instant ambient tracks, and it's constructed out of this is what I'm feeding into it. Maybe the dry wet should be on a slant too. In fact, I think, yes, that is an obvious call. The dry wet should be on a slant too. So see what we did here? 1.0 minus pow, 1.0 minus get parameter, parameter 4, and I also need to determine how much of that there is. That makes the dry wet be on a slant. And by that what I mean is it's going to be sitting around being mostly all wet all the time. As follows. Fire this up. Here's our dry. And it's almost all wet all the time. So now if I sneak a little bit of dry in here, like this, it comes on much more slowly. I can just hint at it. And moving it this far, we still basically can't hear it. And I feel that is much more useful. Got to push it all the way this far over to start hearing it in earnest. That makes it much more useful for this particular plugin. Like, you can move it this far, and it still just sort of barely starts defining a dry quality in there. Cranking up the detune so that we can get weirder stuff happening. And here we are in the depth of space. We had set the bigness much smaller. Let's jump it to something else. That's kind of cool. That's one way of doing it. So yeah, Galactic, folks, I think we've got it. I need to rearrange these sliders a little bit, but this should work. And the labelings of the controls and how you approach them seem to be basically good. You could totally throw this onto, let me see, do I have one over here? I do, hang on. Nano control. Any little thing like, granted this is one that I've put aluminum tape on and stuff, but any kind of hardware controller, map these sliders to the sliders on the thing, and it's like, okay, here's my replace, here's my brightness. You start writing the faders on it, and you would really have an instrument. You could just have like replace, brightness, detune, and dry wet, for instance. 4 sliders, and you just start writing them, and woof. All kinds of stuff can happen. Putting one in bigness would be a little weird because it would smash the buffer a lot, but who could say? Maybe that'd be cool too. I think we have a result. I think I can post this next Sunday and it'll be fine. So cool beans. And that's what I fed into it. Alrighty, this has been a stream. I will catch you folks later. Hope you enjoy the plugin when I post it. In some ways, I guess I will only really know it succeeds if I've also got people flying into a rage and hating it, and also hating my video quality when I post it. That's how I'll know that it really is ready. But that's a whole other story. One that I seem to experience on a regular basis. So, talk to you guys later, and I hope you enjoy Galactic when it comes out this coming Sunday. I'm also going to be working on bringing in the next version of Iron Oxide proper rather than the classic version. I feel I will try to make that one lean a little bit more towards what people are telling me about it. Yeah, I know. We'll see what people say on KVR Audio. We'll see what they make of it. And I'll talk to you folks later. Bye-bye.